That's just me. I'll explain why over the next 2 hours with the help of my partner, the Mac guys, here on Birds 365. John McMullen, how are you this morning, buddy?
I'm doing well, Jody. Just trying to get my bearings, trying to figure out what's going on, trying to figure out what I missed in the 3-4 hours of sleep. Something always happens.
Now, I'd say 3 or 4 hours. What time do you get to sleep?
Probably around 2-ish. I'm
Damn.
exaggerating,
See,
embellishing.
I promised myself I was going to be in bed I was going to be asleep by midnight. I was going to be in bed before midnight and asleep by midnight. Yeah, it didn't happen because the baseball game ended up going past midnight. It is amazing with baseball. And I know it's the playoffs, but they didn't even have to go to extra innings. They laid it out for you that, if we go to extra innings, guess what? No ghost runner. We're back to playing real baseball here
Yeah,
in the
that's
postseason.
nice.
And
Yeah.
they didn't even need to go to extra innings. So the Dodgers walked it off. Chris Taylor with a home run. But it was after midnight by that point. So I said, yeah, hey, good, nice job getting to sleep early tonight, buddy. But I guess I got more sleep than you. So I'm ready to rock and roll here today. You're quasi ready to rock and roll here today. The question is, how ready are the Philadelphia Eagles for the Carolina Panthers on Sunday?
We'll see. As I delve into this game, Jody, I do think it's more winnable than people think. I really do. Not that Carolina's not been playing well because they have, excuse me, but I mean, if you delve into it and look at who they've been playing, the opponents, I mean, sometimes, we talk about the Eagles, the difficult part of the schedule is the front part of the schedule. Um, the easier part is the back half of the schedule. Well, Carolina's had a pretty desirous schedule early in the season with the Jets, as you know, and the Houston Texans, which are arguably two of the worst 5 teams in football. And they took care of business. They deserve credit for that, but it is what it is. And then you talk about New Orleans, which has the big reputation. That was probably the most impressive performance, but the Saints aren't what the Saints typically are. I mean, they're a little bit better than I thought they were going to be, but they're not the Drew Brees Saints. So you factor that into it. And then last week, because I'm knee deep in Eagles stuff, I wasn't paying attention to Carolina, Dallas, and you find out, well, Dallas did what they did to the Eagles. They just beat the brakes off them, and then they had a couple late touchdowns to make it look better than it really was. I think this is a winnable game for the Eagles. Maybe I'm crazy. In fact, I'm wavering. I'm 4-0. I haven't picked the Eagles once this season. I'm wavering. I'm thinking about picking the Eagles.
Between now and Friday, Johnny Mac may be swayed to make his first Eagles win prediction. Stay tuned for that. We'll get to that. I'll hold his feet to the fire, I promise, folks, on Friday. Today, we'll just continue talking about the game, break down the game. And you are right, Johnny Mac. The key game, of course, for both of these two teams is Dallas Cowboys because they're the only common opponent between the two. And, yeah, check the stats. They are eerily similar between the Cowboys doing what they did to the Eagles and what they did last week to the Carolina Panthers. Both of those games are very comparable. First couple of days here this week on Bird 65, I did emphasize the fact that Sam Darnold set an NFL record with 5 rushing touchdowns in the first 4 games of the season. And no NFL quarterback had ever done that before. You're going to knock me over with a feather. I just didn't know that was the case, that Sam Darnold owns that record. Would have bet good money against it. Now, Darnold's a nice quarterback. He can pull it down. He can run when he needs to. I remember a couple of lengthy runs with the Jets when he caught the defense completely off guard. Just smart plays, not, oh, my God, highlight athletic running by guys or over guys or juking guys type plays, just really smart running plays. But he runs effectively. He is nowhere near the rusher that Jalen Hurts is. Hurts is a much more gifted running back. He just hasn't done it down by the end zone as much as Sam Darnold has done. But as far as comparing number of yards and yards per attempt, Sam's under 3 yards per attempt. So a lot of those touchdowns were down by the goal line short attempts, whereas Jalen is ripping off big chunks of yardage. So if I were going into the game, either of these two defense coordinators, the player that I'd be more worried about making a big play with his legs is actually Jalen Hurts over a guy like Sam Darnold.
Yeah, and that's why you got to. I mean, and remember, I mean, teams are game planning to stop Jalen Hurts in the run game. They're not game planning to stop Sam Darnold in the run game. So some of that, sneaky, lack of a better term, sneaky athleticism helps you when you're a quarterback like Sam Darnold, because nobody's concerned. You don't go into as I said, you don't go into the game saying, "Oh, we got to stop Sam Darnold from running." It's just kind of part of the process, and the fact that they aren't paying attention helps him out. Whereas obviously, if you're playing Lamar Jackson, if you're playing Kyler Murray, if you're playing Jalen Hurts, that's part of your plan. Is like, okay, these guys can hurt us this way. We got to figure out. You often see a spy bring the Cowboys into it. All the upheaval they were having. Thought it was going to be Micah Parsons, had to move him to edge rusher against the Eagles. Turned out to be Jalen Smith, who is cut and on his way to Green Bay, evidently. So you have to actually put that in there. And that's one of the things, to an even greater extent, his old buddy in MetLife Stadium, Daniel Jones, is helped by that as well, because Daniel's probably even a better athlete. And every once in a while, the famous run here last year where he tripped, but people are like, wow, look at Daniel Jones. He's a pretty good athlete, and when he gets out there, he could make some things happen as a runner, but you don't think of him as a runner. So when you're not Lamar Jackson, you're not Kyler Murray, where it's just smack dab in your face, you got to deal with this. Those sneaky athletic guys, and Sam Darnold's in that category, that's kind of helpful for them, actually.
Nice little tool to have in your tool belt if you can take off and make a play, surprising the other team when you do so. And yes, the Eagles have to have a half an eye, maybe not a full eye, but a half an eye on that coming up this weekend. All right, before we get further into breaking down the matchup between the two teams, yesterday's media availability for you beat reporters, anybody say anything of consequence that you said, wow, I didn't know that? Wow. They came out and admitted to that. Anything that you thought was of major note from anybody who deigned to meet the media yesterday?
Little rumblings of unhappiness from Fletcher Cox, which I think we talked about Monday or Tuesday on the show. If you laid out a bunch of scenarios, and I said, if you force me to pick one, he's not happy with the scheme. Well, all of a sudden, he made that little quote about playing different positions, moving around, makes it difficult. Just the start, not overt, but you could see, Fletcher's not having the production he's used to. All the questions are starting. Everyone says it's not a big deal. Jonathan Gannon says it. Fletcher says it. Playing out of position. Darius Slay as well. In his case, it wasn't, Slay's personality is so big that, he constantly chirps and talks. And we said that part of it's not that big of a deal. So when he points out, well, the defense might have been terrible against Kansas City, but I wasn't. And he wasn't. He was right. He was pretty good. He's probably the only one who could argue that. But, he's a man coverage corner, and the Eagles aren't playing a lot of man coverage. So at some point, he's probably going to start getting a little upset by that. So, and then we talked about Ryan Kerrigan, who's a little bit lesser down the totem pole, but same thing. If he's playing, 5 technique or 4 technique, on paper, it doesn't make sense. And he's not producing. So just little rumblings. And this is, Jody, when you have a young coaching staff and you start to lose, and you have veterans who've had major success in different schemes, it's human nature to go, well, what the, I used to be doing this, and we used to be good, and what's going on? And that's what I think the Eagles are dealing with a little bit more, Jonathan Gannon than Nick Sirianni, because Nick has so many young players. They don't have a Jalen Reagor can't say I was good at this, and Quez Watkins and DeMonte Smith as a rookie, Jalen Hurts, second-year player. They don't have as many players to say could be the tight ends, but they don't have a ton of players. On defense, they have more players who've had success in other schemes and liked other schemes, and they don't like this scheme early on. So they have that in common with the fan base.
Understood. And this is from a guy just observing on television. I'm not down there watching practice like you. I don't have game film with ISO cameras and the like. So I readily acknowledge that this is not as informed an opinion as others can have. Of the guys you mentioned who are wondering about their usage and how they're being empowered and deployed on the field, like Darius Slay, like other various guys on the defense, Ryan Kerrigan. I have a tougher time writing it off on Fletcher Cox's lack of production because of scheme than those other guys. I can see what you're talking about, playing man corner, not playing man corner, playing with his hand in the dirt, not in the dirt, Ryan Kerrigan. Fletcher Cox is playing two-man inside. Yes, sometimes three techniques, sometimes other techniques. I get that, but the change doesn't seem as drastic. And oh, by the way, one thing that if you're defending Fletcher Cox, nobody's ever going to say, Javon Hargrave has been great. And when you are playing next to a guy who's been great, I'm sorry. Again, I'm not watching the breakdown of the film that the coaches get a chance to look at, but I'm guessing that Hargrave is getting just as many double teams as Fletcher Cox. If that's the case, not the case, what the hell's the other team's defensive coordinator, offense coordinator doing? I'm having a tough time just saying, yeah, well, Fletcher's not getting anything done. It's how they're using him. It's on the coordinator. They're just not putting him in a position to make plays. I'm having a tough time believing that, John.
Well, I get it. You're right. If it continues this way, I always say the NFL is a copycat league, but it's a really slow moving copycat league. So it is true to say Fletcher Cox still today gets far more double teams than Javon Hargrave. It's kind of unbelievable to think about if you're an opposing, and you're looking at it in the immediacy, but that's the way this league works. ESPN stats and info had him at 71% on pass rushes, double teams, Fletcher Cox. That was the second. That was the most since Green Bay last season. So he's still getting double teamed. You can ask yourself, is that the right way to go if you're the opposing offensive coach, offensive coordinator, offensive-minded head coach? But they're still doing it. And now, here's the problem I have. It's not that part of it's true. He's getting doubled like he's Fletcher Cox. My problem is he used to make plays when he got doubled. That's my problem. So if you want to talk about him descending as a player, I don't think there's any doubt he's not on the upswing anymore. He's coming down the other end of the hill. So now it comes down to how quickly does that happen. He's made these plays in the past. He's been double teamed in the past. The one difference is the shift away from 3 technique to 4 technique, sometimes 5 technique, what they call 4-eye technique, which Fletcher specifically mentioned, with these goofy 3-4 looks. That doesn't make sense to me at all with the personnel that the Eagles have. Doesn't make sense to me. And I love Jonathan Gannon. I'll say it publicly. I think he's a great coach. He knows far more about football than I will ever know. However, I look at this, Nick Sirianni, they both say it. Jonathan said it the other day. I don't have a scheme. You got to mold around your players. Oh, okay, I'm taking your word. You don't have the players to run a 3-4. This ain't the Pittsburgh Steelers with, great outside linebacker. This isn't the Baltimore Ravens you're throwing Patrick Johnson out there and Jannard Avery in these mimic 3-4 looks and taking Fletcher Cox away what he does well to be a 2-gap player, or even in 4-eye, which is inside but more of a 1-gap. Doesn't make sense to me. Now, but I will say that's not a heavy majority of the snaps. Those are occasional looks. But those I do question, and I think Fletcher isn't happy with them. So I add that into the equation for this reason, Jody. If the player isn't happy with him and it's not successful and it doesn't make sense, why pound the square peg in the round hole? So from a coaching standpoint, that's my one question.
You're going to start to get a little anarchy within the ranks. I hear you. The guys at Fletcher would have got up against in practice yesterday had they been working on these somewhat questionable packages that they're using. Little bit of a different look yesterday. Jordan Mailata back limited in practice for the first time in a couple of weeks. You and I speculated on this when they didn't put him on IR. You would have thought, okay, he'll be back. Hopefully only 1 week missed. Wrong. He missed 2 weeks. Well, and he should be back for the 3rd week, which would be Carolina this week. He did get back out there on the practice field. They called it limited. Any feel as to how much he was able to accomplish? And now 3 days away from the game, are we going to see Mailata? Are we going to see some kind of combination of Mailata and Dillard? Will they try and bring him back slowly? How do you think left tackle plays Sunday against Carolina?
Well, I think if Jordan's able to go, and he was limited, as you mentioned, he was working in individual drills. And I find this so interesting. He had a big brace on. It was clear either he wasn't fully comfortable with the brace or, it's tough to tell if he's still having problems with the knee, but he kept adjusting it. I will say this, if he plays and the fact that he's limited and they're trying to get him out there, it's pretty clear the hope is he plays. If he plays, I think he's playing right tackle because Lane Johnson's not going to be available for all, it's not official, but, you're pretty up in the 99 percentile range by the way the Eagles were talking. And I find this so interesting because not that they want to get their best players on the field on one particular circumstance, and they think essentially Andre Dillard's better than Nate Herbig, but the fact that they have no problem moving the guy who's been playing organized professional football for 4 years to right tackle from left tackle, and he doesn't care. And Andre Dillard, the 1st-round pick, he's got to stay at left tackle. He's got to stay tethered to left tackle because he's just not good at right tackle. And then Jack Driscoll will be kicked inside to right guard. Landon Dickerson obviously will stay at left guard, and Jason Kelsey will play center. He had a maintenance day yesterday. That's what I think the Eagles are hoping for. A lot of moving parts there. Is Lane going to be back? I don't think so. Is Jordan going to be healthy? If Jordan's not healthy, if he can't play, then you'd go back to what you did last week. Driscoll goes back out to right tackle.
Herbig inside.
Herbig right guard. So that's sort of the ways you can go. But if Lane Johnson can't play and all the indications are he's not going to play, I think it's going to be Andre Dillard at left tackle, Jordan Mailata at right tackle.
Which is interesting. And you stated it well. It comes down to basically a comparison of Dillard against Herbig at different positions. They ask him to do different things, but one of those guys in, one of those guys out. And you're suggesting moving Mailata, keeping Dillard in. Herbig is the guy who doesn't get a chair when the music stops. You agree with that? Here's my issue with it. Here's the reason why I would suggest that could be the wrong thing to do. You got Mailata coming back. You're telling me he's got a big brace on his knee. You just saw a couple of individual drills, not the full-blown scrimmage practice action. You're going to move him to the other side where how much cross-training did they actually do with him in preseason playing on the other side? I know he's done it before, and he's certainly done it better than Dillard moving to the other side. but how much work has he actually gotten done? You're going to put him out there with a not fully inflated tire on his knee and ask him to play on the other side? I think it could end up screwing up his knee even worse and then seeing him go down for the rest of the season. If it's me, and I know Stoutland is probably going to be the guy who's going to make the call there, I would not screw around. I would not risk. You just gave Mailata that big contract extension. You're dedicated to him for the next several years. Oh no, I'm not moving him to the other side if I'm the Eagles.
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't factor in the health part of it that could affect him. I think from the cross training part of it, that's my point. They're not even concerned about Jordan's ability to move from side to side, which I find so ironic because so many other players who've been playing the sport for so much longer can't do it. And he just, maybe it is just from starting so late. And he's like, what's the big deal? And the other guys get it in their head that, oh, I can't move from left to right. It's like wiping with the opposite hand. That's what Jordan described it as back in the day. But he's like, all right, mate, I'll go do it. That's just the way he is. So the health part of it, that's interesting. That's where you got to lean on your trainers and say, could it affect the way he moves? Could it affect his knee? And maybe he ends up not playing, and we're not having this discussion. Right. And that's why you have Jack Driscoll who can move inside. And he's, on the right side, he's the same way as far as moving inside and outside. He's like, all right, Lane's not playing 2 hours before the game. Let's go. I was going to play right guard. I'll play right tackle. So certain guys have that mentality. Certain guys don't.
And I think it speaks to the value of Driscoll that he is as flexible as he is. All right, flexible guy joining us next. Our buddy, Kevin Kincaid from Crossing Broad. We haven't had him on in about a month and a half, as a matter of fact. I haven't talked Birds football with KK in a bit. Mr. Do It All for Crossing Broad, Kevin Kincaid joins us next here on Birds 365.